Hey, it's Josh with There's No Business Like podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, we wanted to address what has happened over the past few days on the national landscape of arts funding. The National Endowment for the Arts on May 2nd sent out emails notifying people that had been awarded grants that grant funding had been pulled. This happened to grantees all across the country in all different fields of the arts. This statement was included on that email. The NEA is updating its grant-making policy priorities to focus funding on projects that reflect the nation's rich artistic heritage and creativity as prioritized by the president. Consequently, we are terminating awards that fall outside of these new priorities. The NEA will now prioritize projects that elevate the nation's HBCUs and Hispanic serving institutions, celebrating the 250th anniversary of American independence, foster AI competency, empower houses of worship to serve communities, assist with disaster recovery, fostered skilled trade jobs, make America healthy again, support the military and veterans, support tribal communities, make the District of Columbia safe and beautiful, and support the economic development of Asian American communities. Funding is being allocated in a new direction in furtherance of the administration's agenda. To me, this is a very clear-cut attack on the arts field across the United States within this nation. There was a statement put out by the Public Theater, and I want to read that statement for you now. The National Endowment for the Arts announced cancellation of current and proposed grants following a devastating proposed federal budget from the executive office. This move is more than just a budget cut. It's a blow to the heart of our cultural life. The loss of these grants will inflict real and lasting harm on arts organizations across the country, many of which are already struggling. But this isn't just about funding. It is a clear signal, an attempt to silence the voices of artists and strip away the idea that art belongs to all of us, that it is a shared public good at the core of our democracy. We cannot stay quiet. We must raise our voices, write, call, and rally. We must remind our elected officials, whom we chose to represent us, that the arts matter, that the NEA matters. If we allow the endowment to be dismantled, we lose more than money. We lose a vital symbol of who we are and who we aspire to be. Artists work every day to bind this diverse nation together, to help us see each other, to help us understand. The real work of art is the work of making us whole. This is about more than grants. This is about democracy, about unity. We must not let it go without a fight. This won't be the last of talk and discussion about what has happened with the NEA and how we feel about it here at There's No Business Like. For now, we'll jump into today's episode featuring discussion about the Angela Mellick interview that was posted last week and further discussion about arts funding in general.
Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Welcome back to There's No Business Like. Last week you heard an interview with Angela Mellick, and this week we are going to jump in and discuss that. I'm here with my friends Brian
Zelmer from Bardavon Presents.
Katie.
Hi, everyone. Katie Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates.
Kevin
Maynard coming at you from Tallahassee with opening nights at Florida State University.
So sadly, Danielle couldn't join us today. So this episode will not be nearly as funny as it possibly could have been. But let's jump right in. And what were you guys' thoughts on Angela Mellick's interview?
Yes. Yes to all the things. Yes to yes to new data. Yes to new research. Yes to framing our case for why the arts matter in so many different ways. Yes to all the things.
ROA is here to stay. I agree with what Katie just said. I think it's about time. I mean, like she said, we focus so much on a lot of the economic impact. And I know that's the kind of language that's important with what's going on with the federal level. That's where they're focusing on. But we've made that case for so long, and we have all the studies now. And it's time to have I like the new approach that she's talking about. It's scientific. It's not just like feel good. It has numbers and data behind it, and research. But it also it talks about the long-term impact, not just, you know, what's happening now and then we move on and that's already in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll echo what everybody else has said. I mean, it was a fascinating interview. I think it's a fascinating model. I think having that dashboard to be able to look at and track those things within your community, you know, I think is really impressive. I think what's more impressive is the fact that, you know, a lot of the things that she's tracking, or a lot of the things that like we know anecdotally, and we know like these things happen, but to be able to quantify that like in your local community, I think is the more important thing that really can help drive some funding. You know, because all the things she's talked about, I mean, we, as you know, we've all been advocating for that and like telling that story, but now to have something that shows, you know, just how much that moves the needle in your community is really, really cool.
The data to back up these tangible results that we are talking about so much more: health outcomes, wellness outcomes, combating the loneliness epidemic, creating connection in communities that will benefit people in so many different ways. Those are the things that are sort of the forefront of not only pop culture, but also policy making in the United States. So having the data to back that up. And if you all remember, if you listened to our interview a few weeks ago on community engagement that Gary Minyard was a part of from Dayton Live, this is the study that Gary was talking about that his venue is taking part of. He is one of these 20 pilot venues. And I think Gary made the case really well in that conversation in terms of why our other arguments have been falling short and why this data is necessary. And I'm excited to see what comes of it.
This interview and our conversation now really leads us into a discussion about how we currently fund the arts as a nation, as an industry. And is that current model tenable, or are we actually watching that model crumble in front of us as we speak?
I heard you talk or ask that question in the interview, Josh, and I just, my pushback is that I don't think there's one cookie cutter model. I've been in charge of several venues now, and it's been different models each case. What I think is working today for me and my current organization, Bardavon Presents, is we have a lot of lasting funding that are endowments, and we basically have those for life. I mean, there's, you know, large sums of money donated by foundations or by private citizens where we get the interest every year off of those. So, you know, yes, the economy does impact that. Some years because they're based on, you know, the stock market and other things like that. So there's years where we get more than other years, depending on how the economy is doing. But it's something that we'll always have coming to us. That really gives us a strong foundation to build on all the other types of funding opportunities. I've been in a situation in a previous venue, and I won't name which one, but where we were highly dependent on grants. And every year, you know, we just hoped or assumed that we would get the grant. And of course, grants aren't there forever. They change who they're going to give them to. And there's all kinds of things that happen. So if you're basing your organization on just, you know, constantly getting that grant, I suggest start looking for something else, because that's not a long-term successful model, no matter, you know, this current situation federally or not. So
I think when I hear like these sort of comments and these sort of questions, is like, you know, we need to reframe and sort of think of like this and instead of this or that. It's, you know, that, you know, yeah, like we've been talking about, and I think the general consensus and general idea is, to me, it's not whether or not, you know, government funded arts is the way to go. It's, and I think Angela touched on this in her response, was like, it's a balance. You know, it's not, you know, I don't think that we should ever have so much government funding or even funding from a singular source enough that sort of drives the mission and drives that vision that like takes over, like that you get mission creep from. So you need to like diversify where those things are coming from. And then at the same time, you know, I will also say, like, take it where you can get it. You know, I mean, maybe for certain organizations, certain times, that singular funder is the right way to go, because that's where the mission is. That's what the mission is.
thinking about taking funding where you can, or being reliant on one thing, or not diversifying, or lack of our sort of willingness to go with scientific data or make the economic argument, is that we as arts people understand the intrinsic value of the arts, and we want everyone else to understand and value that intrinsically as well. And so I do feel we've been really reticent to that. And then we talk about mission and vision and values, and it sort of feels icky sometimes to go like, yep, I'm going to take money from this funder who doesn't 100% align with our mission, vision, and values, but that's where the money is. So I'm going to take the money and run. And so I feel like there's an internal battle sometimes within our field of like doing what is practical. And at the end of the day, stand in front of our donors, in front of our patrons, in front of our artists, and say, we are sticking to our mission, vision, and values. And we are, for lack of a better term, fighting for what's right? Fighting for that intrinsic value of the arts, standing up for truth and beauty and artistic expression and education and those sorts of things, right? It feels like there's a dichotomy there. And I know something I struggle with. So I don't know how that plays into this, but there's some tough decisions to be made. And so when do you take the money and run and use it for good?
First of all, you don't take the money when it doesn't align with your principles. But mission is not something, we always talk about mission as like it's this like ironclad, solid thing that never changes. But we should actually every couple of years be revisiting our mission and making sure that it actually still aligns with our goals and our principles and who we are and who we want to be. But if there's money out there that we could get, but it doesn't align with any of that, then we shouldn't even be considering that. That's my opinion. Because just for the very reasons you're talking about, it steers you in a way away from what you want to be doing or should be doing.
So here's my question on that. I fully agree that you shouldn't take a gift if it comes with those strings attached that will push your mission, vision, principles to do something outside of that. However, how do you feel about situations where somebody wants to give money who like maybe that money doesn't come from something that you find ethical, but they're not putting any strings on that? So, I
mean, in an ideal world, I wouldn't take it.
But why not? I mean, if that money isn't like they're not dictating it.
If that money is that company or that person saying, we believe in what you do and we believe in how you do it, we don't want to change anything else. We just want to give you the funding.
Yes.
And are we promoting them or attaching our name with theirs in any way?
I mean, I think that's the question. It's like, where do you draw that line? Because to me, I can see if like, it's like, for instance, I wouldn't be crazy about it if it came with naming rights. But if it was like, they're going to be listed in our program, I don't necessarily care. If they're just like one of our funders, one of our donors. If it comes with naming rights on a building, that's where like I draw the line. But like I look at these things and, hear these things like, oh, we have to return this money because so-and-so supports this cause. But like, they're not dictating that you support that cause. They're not dictating that the money goes to, those things. And so I go, why not use that to do good with it?
Kevin, I draw the line if I have to put their name in a program or whatever, if they're a member of the community and we just don't align politically or whatever, that's fine. We're here for the community. They're part of the community too. So I have no problem in that case. But if it's the KKK or some extreme group like that, I don't care. I don't want that in my program. That doesn't belong there at all. I don't want any association with a hate group or something to that level. So I think there's definitely a line there. But if it's just simply, oh, this person supports things that I don't believe in, but it has nothing to do with what their support is for the organization, I think that's fine as a community organization because, again, we're there for the whole community and they're not forcing us to do something that we don't align with internally with our own principles and goals and stuff. So there's a lot of gray area there.
There is.
But there's definitely black and white areas there when it comes to, extreme groups or hate groups or any of that kind of stuff.
That's fair. That is a very good point. We hear these stories of people who like the Sackler family. So you take money from that family who made their millions off of the opioid pandemic. But if they just want to if they just want to give you that money to do your programming, like where do you fall on that? Like things like that. Like I don't necessarily believe in how they made that money, but I don't know that I would turn it down, depending on the strings that come with that. And I think people are just so quick to say like, oh, I would never take that from them. And I'm going, why not?
I mean, if you have to hand out fentanyl patches at the door, then that's probably a problem.
Yeah, no, we probably won't do that. But that's where I start to get curious.
Our funding models are going to have to change. So I do think that these are good ethical questions for us to be having discussions around within our own organizations.
I think really the reason I'm curious about it, to have more conversations on it and like encourage people to think about it, is that I think that there's a way to yes on a lot of these things, and figuring out like where your lines are on some of those. Because like I said earlier, I mean, sometimes like when I say take the money where you can get it, like that is hyperbole. Like that is sort of over the top. I mean, because yes, at its core, I will 100% say that, but there are plenty of instances. Brian, you had a great one that I go, oh yeah, I don't know that I could take that. But I think there's a lot of times that people just instantly go, yeah, we can't accept that money, without really taking the time to think about that. That's all I was, I didn't mean to like hijack that, but.
So let's look at currently. NEA funding has now said we're not going to fund anyone who has active DEI programs. Where does that land for organizations? Is that a line where you say, hey, this is our mission, part of our mission, part of the way we function is to provide diversity and culture within our community?
Yeah, Josh, I think that is one of those lines. I mean, I think it depends on how your organization is set up, like what it's currently doing. I mean, I'm not an advocate for cutting those programs just because you need those dollars or want those dollars. However, I will also be an advocate for those folks who are able to reach their DEI goals and their DEI initiatives without specialized programming. I think for certain institutions, for certain programs, you can achieve those goals programmatically without having those specialized programs in there.
We're very fortunate that we don't have to personally go through that, but my heart does go out to the people who have had the special programs, and we're getting some of this funding because of those programs, specifically creating those programs in some cases for that funding, and now all of a sudden they're shifting it without any kind of ramp to change things. It's just like a light switch.
Well, I'm also interested to see how many state organizations that are actually re-granting organizations of the NEA funding that are going to be forced to change the way that they put out grants based on the NEA's funding model at this point.
Yeah, 40% of NEA budget actually goes to fund state and regional arts agencies. And so whether you're getting direct NEA dollars or not, if you're getting a state grant, you're more than likely getting funds that have originated with the NEA. How do we capture this moment, and how do we utilize this as a way to make the case better to our own donors, to foundations that we're working with, to make the argument that the arts are worth funding and worth keeping in our communities? While we're waiting on this data from the study that Angela is working on, I would point people to other data sources like SMU Data Arts and NCAR, the National Center for Arts Research at SMU. Like, there are other great sources of data out there that we should be utilizing more fully. And I don't think that we as an industry really take the time to dig into that and utilize those statistics that other people spend tons of time researching and putting together for us to the fullest extent. I mean, we're all busy, we know it, but if we took a little bit of time to dig into these existing resources and leverage them to our advantage, it might make things just a little bit easier for us.
Some of the things that I've been thinking about based on this conversation with Angela, and I think I should preface this by saying, as soon as I listened to it, I text Josh and told him just how amazing I thought this interview was. So like me pushing back on this is
specifically
really
how amazing he thinks Angela is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, she's another woman I want to grow up to be, because I will never be as smart as her, like hands down.
I found myself thinking about this during sort of the latter part of this conversation with her. She references, and we all talk about the arts as a business and like it being run like a business and doing those sort of things. And in that same moment, she also talks about, sort of the emotional attachment to certain things. And the like the emotion thing that like we're trying to capture or trying to learn more about are the same things that when financially it doesn't behoove a company are the things that they dump. Like they stop those research projects. They stop those things because it doesn't financially make money. Yet we're still driving that same thing home here. So I'm wondering, like, I just wonder like how effective that's going to be in the long run. I mean, we see these things happening in the medical system as well. And like, obviously, like they're trying to gather that data because they're also looking for funding. They're also doing those things. But we're also seeing a lot of medical organizations being consumed up by faith-based organizations to be able to take over that funding and do that. The two sides of my brain are just like sort of at a battle on this.
You answered yourself earlier. It's not either or. I think it goes back to it's not being either or, that there's room for all of it. And we just need to reframe the way we think about it. But I think it's both.
Thank you, Brian. I am very smart. That is true. I did answer myself. Nice work. I think the other thing that her conversation made me think about are those funding models like we've been talking about. What I would love to take some time to actually research and dive into are the perpetual funding models that like some states have, some communities have, and really looking at, is there a level at which, like a level of funding at which that would, keep X amount of arts organizations alive in a community, to be able to perpetually fund those things. Or what I really think about is as the philanthropic side, is there a specific line item in an organization's budget that we could fund that would prove to increase the longevity of an organization?
So with the Marion Cultural and Civic Center in Marion, and this is speaking to a rural community, our funding from the city, a large portion of that comes from hotel tax specifically. Hotel tax is specifically set up to fund us, another like conference convention venue, and then tourism agency here in the county. And so all of the bed tax goes to those three entities. Part of our drive is to expand our footprint as far as people that will come into the community, because the more people we get to come into the community, the more it funds us through that taxation. The additional part of our funding through the city comes from sales tax, which is also, whenever you look at restaurants and nightlife, is another thing that we are supporting within the community. It comes from the city's general operating fund, but the city's general operating fund is funded by sales tax. So that's the way it's structured here, is that we support those mechanisms, and those mechanisms then support us. And that accounts for just under 25% of our overall budget. And everything else comes from commercial programming. And so the commercial programming is what underwrites the arts and culture programming, because pretty much all of the money from the city and from taxes goes towards just operating cost for the venue, operating cost and staffing. And then everything else within the presenting side of our model here comes from successful commercial programming and rental structure.
That's really fascinating. And I think a similar model could work for venues that are situated within like a downtown area. So they have support from the DDA. They are maybe a city owned or county owned entity. But for those that are independent nonprofits or, collegiate, like there's some challenges there as well. But I think that's super cool.
That's just the way that we're structured. and it works for us. I mean, Brian, his venue is similar, as in that their actual operating comes from donors and from foundations and funds, and
Yeah, we don't get anything from the city,
so that's where their operating comes from. And I assume that their presenting balances they're presenting for the most part.
Yep.
Kevin, I think your question about like funding a specific line item that would lend to the longevity of organizations is interesting, and I have no idea what that is or where that funding would come from, because obviously we're seeing government funding shrink. We're seeing the philanthropic sector have a real difficult moment. It seems the Chronicle of Philanthropy published an article recently about how 70 of sort of major foundations across the country are finally sort of coming together and aligning and planning how to fill the gaps that we're going to be seeing for nonprofits across the country. But it took them about 3 months to sort of coalesce around that, and are now we're just starting to see movement. And my guess, based on the trends we've been seeing, at least in the last 2 years, is that very little of that funding will be directed towards the arts. It's going to be directed towards social good, unless we can get the data that Angela is working on, right, to demonstrate that we are a social good, right? But I think that's going to be a real struggle. So I was thinking about an episode of the Aubrey Burke Hour podcast, the Offstage Mic, where she talks about education programs and how education programs can be a great source of revenue for your venue. And she speaks specifically about the idea about adult education programs. You can ramp up adult education opportunities in your organization as a source of revenue. And so that got me thinking about, how do we diversify programming to increase ticket revenue, essentially, right? So we are less reliant upon grants and upon, private and individual donors and state and federal funding by diversifying programming. And I don't think it has to be like a massive overhaul, but I think audiences have shifted enough that there's maybe some new categories. So as just taking that example, thinking about adult education programming, we are seeing huge shifts in populations of more single adults or married and childless. So there's a different audience segment that we necessarily haven't thought about how to tap into, that are looking for new hobbies. They're looking for different ways to spend their time. They have disposable income that maybe didn't exist 20 years ago within that particular segment of the population. So how do we sort of look at our programming models as well to increase revenues in that way, or find other partnerships or places in the community where we could be doing innovative offsite programming to increase ticket revenues? I think we need to look at programming models as well to help with the funding crisis that we're going to see moving forward.
Well, thank you all for joining in on this conversation today. It's been fun to kind of explore the thought exercise of what are possibilities with funding? How can we restructure as organizations to be more resilient, more dependable on things other than government funding? And also on how we actually define the things that are within our realm currently. Thank you to Angela for spurring on all of this thought, and for your time, for your interview, and for your wonderful perspective. Catch us next time here on There's No Business Like.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
I want to shift gears just because I think we're going to need to spend the remainder of our half hour on Josh's last question: what is art? Let's start debating that.
I actually have a standard answer to that.
Of course you do, Kevin. Go ahead.
I do, yeah. So actually, this actually comes from my first mentor, Mr. Mike Music. He said, art is anything that makes you feel emotion, and sometimes that emotion is rage. And that is really how I've come to sort of define art, is like the things that make you feel emotion, because it really transcends all boundaries.
It's So if you don't feel emotion, it's not art. It's not possible to be art that just makes you think.
No, I mean, I think there is some emotion that happens in that thinking process.
But what if there isn't? There could be something that's purely just cognitive and not at all emotional.
It doesn't excite you if you're thinking about that, though.
Maybe it doesn't.
Can you think of one thing that makes you think that doesn't like invoke some other emotion along that?
Yes, but I can't describe it. So.
What Brian is telling you is he is a department store mannequin that feels nothing. Like he's just there.
Okay, let's not go down that road.
I can stand by and support that Brian is emotionless and lifeless and thoughtless for the most part. Yeah,
thoughtless. I don't think you're thoughtless, Brian.
Thank you. And to clear up what I was saying about not feeling before, I meant like just because I don't experience something from a piece of art, I can still appreciate it because I know it speaks to somebody else. And so I know that it's art because it speaks to somebody, even if it's not speaking to me emotionally.
it's too late. We already know that you don't have a soul, Brian.
That has nothing to do with it.
He's just a robot. That's okay.
No, I've spent hours debating what is art with a friend in a diner for like weeks at a time. We'd spend like 8 hours in the diner all night long.
Were you like smoking cigarettes and wearing a beret?
It was so fun. I might have worn a beret once or twice during that, but like it was just so much fun. I just, the two of us love to debate. I miss him. He's in Laramie, Wyoming. But we used to just debate about everything. But I remember what is art is one that just was like an ongoing one for us.
I think you should record that debate. I'll listen.
It would have been so fun to listen to.
Brian, I think, and Josh, I think it's a great question. And I don't know that you can pinpoint it. I think you can pinpoint it maybe at one particular moment in your life, but talk to me again 10 minutes from now or 10 days from now or 10 years from now. And my answer is going to be different because I think art is purely of a moment, how you are feeling, what you are experiencing, what the circumstances are around you. And I mean, I would say for me in this moment, like art is anything that, I don't even know how to say it, but art is anything that feeds your soul.
So, Brian, as someone without a soul, how would you define art?
I can't define art. I think it goes along with what Katie was saying, how it's like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder at that moment, that you might find something as art in one stage in your life and then later on go back to it and be like, this is shit. You know, it's like, what was I thinking? You know, I don't know. I don't believe in trying to define it. You just, if it's art for you, it's art for you. And if someone is creating, I think just the art of, I liked the language going back to our interview, the language of creation, I think is what is based in art. And I'll leave it at that because it's just too hard to define because it means different things to different people, but you know it when you see it for yourself.
I agree. I think for me, it's any expression of creativity, and that goes into the sciences, that goes into every aspect of our lives. That, you know, architecture is art and science is art in certain ways because that creativity has to be there for it to move forward. And so I think there is art present everywhere that there is creativity and creation.
All right, you gonna wrap?